Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit. The book of Acts is action packed, full of miracles, angelic encounters, and supernatural events. There are many people today that believe those things faded away with the times of the apostles. There are yet still others that believe they are happening to this day. Our guest today is one of them, who has written a book about her experiences. If you could please help me welcome Kaitlyn Ramos. How you doing, Kaitlyn?
Doing great. It's great to be here today. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's great to have you. So, I'd like to just jump right in. If you could tell me a little bit more about yourself, how you were raised and your upbringing.
Sure. I was raised in a little town in Alabama. My parents were business owners.
What part of Alabama, if you don't mind me asking?
A little town called Enterprise.
Okay. How far from Linux is that?
I don't know.
You know where Bruton is?
Yes, we're not far from Bruton. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I stayed out there in Linux for a while.
Okay, cool.
Have you ever heard of Dinosaur Adventureland?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No,
So you were saying?
no. Well, my parents were business owners, and we attended a small Lutheran church growing up. And my mom was my Sunday school teacher, so that was always pretty cool. When I was little, she was my Sunday school teacher, and yeah, I lived in that same little town from the time I was born till I graduated high school, essentially. So, and then after that, I, went on to college and ended up marrying a military guy. So now I've kind of lived in a lot of different states.
So during that time, while you were raising or while you were being raised, did you have any times of doubt? Did you stop being a believer at all, or?
Um, I would never say that I stopped being a believer. There were times that I was not as faithfully on my walk as I wish I had been, um, especially looking back at it now. And especially as an adolescent, going through the trials of, teenagedom and all those things, I definitely walked away a few times from things that I knew were right. But at the same time, I never doubted the existence of God or that He cared for me.
What are some of those things you walked away from?
So I was not praying or reading my Bible and in the Word as consistently as I should have been, as we as believers are called to be. And I was not being careful in choosing who I hung out with. Definitely people that were not influences in the right direction, and just not being concerned with God's will for my life, just being concerned with my own will.
Okay. So, any of those people, were they alternate religions, other than Christianity?
No, not really. In that small area where I lived, Christianity was the really the only religion anyone talked about. You either that or you were no religion. I don't remember, much of anything else ever being discussed.
When I was out there in Alabama, I seen a lot of churches. And I'm thinking, man, are there even enough people to fill these churches?
And there are, believe me, there are. But some of my friends were definitely also in those stages of doubting or moving away from their beliefs and things like that. So it was a lot of, the blind leading the blind, you would say, and not really understanding, what we were supposed to be doing and not reaching out for the help and the guidance that we should have had.
Okay, so now you're in college, and what was that experience like?
So I attended college, not too far from my hometown, and I would say it was, as far as my faith walk, I wasn't really thinking about my faith walk at all at that point. College was just not a time where I was paying attention to that, sadly. Now, I never would have gone so far as to say that I was an unbeliever or that I didn't know God, because at that point I had had, a very real experience with Him, and knowing that He existed and that He cared about me. And I'm very disappointed in myself to say that it didn't shake me up more than it did at the time. But of course, later on, I, reflected on those things and started to really understand the magnitude of God's love.
Well, coming up and growing up, you didn't face anything too traumatic, right?
Um, Actually, yes. So, when I was in high school, my senior year, my school was destroyed by a tornado, and the entire student body was inside, including me. Um, it was a really scary experience. We were all, huddled in the hallways. And, teenagers, we think, oh man, this is great. We're out of class. We're not having to think about this stuff. We're just in the hallway chatting with our friends.
Now,
And
were
then
any
all
of those drills that they teach you in school, like, hey, this is what happens in case of this emergency, did that help play out at all, or was all that out right out the window?
No, it absolutely did. We were all huddled in the hallway, and as soon as everything got real, um, we did cover our heads, and we were along the sides of the hallway and everything. And I do think that it certainly saved some lives. Um, but the hallway that I was on, the roof came off, and the walls closed in. So we did have several deaths on that hallway.
Were all the windows closed?
So all the windows were closed. The classroom doors were closed. They were. And
Yeah,
that's where
'cause,
the windows were.
the air pressure on the outside becomes so low that all the air inside the place just pops. So the house
Yes,
is
it
just like
did.
a
And we could
balloon.
feel the glass shoot in from underneath the doorways
Wow.
as it was going on. Yeah. And it was in that chaos and turmoil that someone approached me, someone that I had never met before. It was a young Black man. I didn't know who he was, never saw him before, never saw him again. But he crouched over me, covered me with his body, and told me, "It's going to be okay, Kaitlyn. I've got you. I'm going to take care of you." And when it was over, he was gone. I I remember feeling this sense of peace as he was covering me. And I can't describe that as anything other than angelic. And
And you didn't know him at all?
mm-mm, no,
Wow.
never saw him before, never saw him again. And, it was just in that moment that it became very clear to me that there was a God who knew my name and cared enough to send someone to take care of me in a very scary moment.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of what it says in the Bible, is that that's why you should entertain strangers, because you never know, that you might be entertaining angels,
In
and it's kind of like
disguise.
a test for you.
Yeah.
And I just had a recent event that happened not too long ago, and this old man, I was at work, and I got off for lunch, and I went to like a Burger King, and I was coming out, and an old gentleman came out and, hey, I'm lost. I'm trying to get to Virginia or something like that, and
Mhm.
I'm not even from here, from where I'm living,
Right.
and everything in me just wanted me to tell him, you know what? I'm not even from here. Good luck. And, just to jump in my car and go back to work. And that thought popped in my head, it could be entertaining. This could be an angel. This could be a test. So I went out on my way. I went and got some a paper and a pen, and I Google searched the directions and wrote them down for him. I even offered him lunch, just to be sure. I figured,
Right. You just never know.
yeah, you never know. And I
Mhm.
think that's happened many times. Like, I'm not sure if I've ever encountered an angel, in that sense,
Right.
to see whether or not, but I do my best when I see somebody in need. If I can help them, I will help them. I'll go out of my way because I mean, I don't want to be there. And Jesus said, I don't know you. When I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me something to drink. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. So I do my best for that. So as you were saying,
Oh, just that experience was just I do believe that there was an angel there that day, and that obviously I was protected for a purpose, and like you said, you just never know where the angels are among us. So absolutely.
okay. So after you got went to college, you met you said a Marine.
Oh, he's actually a soldier. He's in the army.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, we got married in 2013. So we've been married about 12-ish years now. Um, and, we've kind of lived all over the place. Started off in Georgia, moved to Texas, Oklahoma, Kentucky. Now we're in Kansas. It's just kind of been, all over the place. But it's been good. The one thing about moving around a lot is you have to re-find that church home every time you move,
Yeah.
and that becomes especially when it's every 3-4 years, or whatever, and it can
Now, are
be.
you a particular denomination today?
I am not.
So you just do your best to find a Bible-based, spirit-filled church.
Yeah,
That's what you
Bible-based
probably.
spiritual church. We've attended Presbyterian, Methodist, and non-denominational churches. They'll just give you that, but as far as having a particular denomination, neither my husband or I are very particular about um, whatever the word is for the church, as long as they believe the Bible and preach the truth.
So, which denomination gives the best services?
Oh man, you know what? I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it's just whether the leaders are in tune with the Spirit, if they're preaching the Bible, if their hearts are attuned to God. That's really the important thing. And then they're able to pastor the flock well.
You think praise and worship is a big part of, or it needs to be a big part of the worship service? And by praise and worship, I'm talking about the singing and
The
all
singing and
that.
that kind of thing. You know, I that really depends on the person. Not everybody connects in the same way. Now, I do know that praise and worship, as far as music in the Bible, has has always been important. I mean, David wrote, the Psalms, some of them as songs to be sung during worship. And, you know, when King Saul was dealing with his issues and everything, he would call for David to, play the lyre for him. I think it was the lyre.
Yeah.
So music and that kind of thing has always been part of worship. And I will not say that it's not important, but everybody encounters God in their own way. Some do it, through poetry. Others do it through, connection to nature and God's creation. So, you can probably enjoy church outside and, be just as much in the spirit as someone who's, got their hands up and singing on Sunday morning. So I won't say that it's not important, but I also won't deny anybody else's experience.
As for me, my thing is I try to think of everything in a real intellectual mind. I'm more
Mhm.
towards study and teaching. So to me, usually I'd hear this praise and worship. I'm like, when's it gonna be over? I want to get to the meat and potatoes. Just give me
Get to
the
the meat
message already. I'm hungry. And
Mm-hmm.
I what I've noticed is that a lot of the time that we got these distractions, and and I believe wholeheartedly that it's demons that don't want you to get the message. They want you to get distracted. So I think one thought that I've been kind of dwelling on this last couple of days is I've been taking the time not to get too anxious and actually pay attention to the praise and worship and try to listen to it a little more and get more involved in the song because where the Holy Spirit dwells, no other spirit can dwell. All
Mm-hmm.
the other spirits are kicked out. So I figure if I'm a little more in tune to, the praise and the worship, I can probably be a little more in tune into when the actual word comes. I can be more apt to understand it. Um, so, can you tell us a little bit about your time after that, jumping around? Oh,
Yeah. So, along with, you know, trying to find churches everywhere we lived, it's also been interesting, trying to find work everywhere as a military spouse. I'm a teacher, so, I've gotten the opportunity to teach in a couple different states, but,
what grades do you teach?
so I started off teaching kindergarten. Um, and I eventually moved into special education and ended up specializing in dyslexia.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you don't
which
mind the chaos?
eh, let me say I transitioned to teaching online several years ago, so it is not nearly as chaotic as it used to be. I will say that, but it's been nice not to have to change jobs every time we move.
Yeah. But it is a ministry, right? I mean, you,
Absolutely. I mean, those kids. When you talk about entertaining angels in disguise, or you talk about whenever you serve the least of these, when you're talking about children who have no control over their lives, they have no say really in what happens to them from one day to the next, and when you're serving them, you are absolutely taking care of the least of these. Now, they're not the least of these as far as like their worth in the eyes of God. Obviously, Jesus loved the little children, but they don't have the control over their lives the way adults do. And they're really just, they need someone to guide them. They need someone who loves God to show them God's love. And as a teacher, you may be the only person who does that.
now currently, in what state are you?
I'm in Kansas right now.
In Kansas. Okay, and in the states that you've actually traveled to, being a teacher, have you had to deal with any of these radical laws with kids transitioning and stuff like that, and not telling the parents?
I have not had to deal with any of that, thank goodness. I've
Yeah.
not had any personal experience with that situation, so I cannot speak to that. It would be very, very difficult for me if I had to be in that situation, though.
Yeah, you'd probably consider another trade, huh?
Well, I don't know. I have absolutely know that I've been called to be, a teacher and in education. I know that, in my heart, that is where God has placed me. So it would be really hard for me to say, nope, got to go somewhere else, because, God needs warriors in the trenches.
Okay. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about your book?
Yeah. So it is called, I have a copy right here. It's called A Dream Fulfilled Life. And in there, I talk about just my spiritual formation in different areas of my life, through just my marriage, through motherhood, even the privilege I had to care for one of God's creatures, my dog that I had for 15 years. I tell the story of him and how um, I really understood that idea of people having dominion over the animals, through going through his end of life care. That was one
Yeah.
thing that's really impactful for
Now,
me.
there is something really special about animals and stuff, and I think it really reveals a lot about God's creation. I mean, just the connection you have with your pets. I mean, I used to have a I used to have a dog, and it's like I could tell her. I started getting some little desert mice in my
Hmm.
in my trailer or in my RV, and I told
Hmm.
her, if you see any mice, kill them all. And by the next few days, there was no mice. I
Oh
swear to you.
goodness.
Like, she knew exactly what I was telling her. Like, my gosh, God's
Hmm.
creation is crazy. And I had a turkey too. I was raising some turkeys and some chickens, right?
Hmm.
And I could tell the turkey, hey, go get me cinnamon. And she would run and she'd go get me that chicken and she'd bring her to me. Or I could tell her,
Wow.
round them all up and get them inside, and she would round them all up and get them inside. You just see them flying. Shoo, shoo, shoo. So I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a, a, a great experience when you see something like that, just to see God's
Mhm.
creation. And so,
Absolutely.
so you were saying?
Oh, just how amazing it was, just to understand our dominion over the animals. It was a really hard thing, especially at the end of his life. He um, developed diabetes and then eventually cancer. And his last day, he could no longer walk, and he was at a point where he couldn't even swallow. Like, his one joy was, his snacks basically, and he couldn't even swallow. So, having to explain to my daughter that, sometimes, God decides our days. God knows our days. He's got them numbered, and he decides, everything about humans and, those kinds of things as far as, when the end of our life is going to be. Um, but for, my dog, I was able to choose that for him, having dominion over the animals and able to give him a quiet and peaceful passing, and, surrounded by his family. So that was, very, you wouldn't think of, something like that being a spiritual experience, but it was just knowing that, God gave us those, um, God, God gave us that power, I suppose, and that dominion over the earth.
And in times like that, it is like losing a family member. I know whenever
Mhm.
I lost a pet, it was like losing a family member.
Yeah.
They all have their own personalities, and it's like a little person kind of.
They do. They're like little toddlers.
So what else do you cover in your book?
So another really important one that I want to bring up is, so one day after school, my daughter and I were in the car. I was going to go, and she, was about 5 at the time and growing like a weed, as 5-year-olds do. And so we were on our way to get her some new school clothes at Target. We were in the car, doing our thing. She and I were singing, laughing back and forth. I don't remember what song we were singing, but she loved to sing in the car when she was little. And all of a sudden, there was a semi truck that came up behind us really quickly, and out of nowhere, the lane I was in also ended. So it was one of those things where I had to get off, like I needed to get off the road, but it happened so quickly I didn't even know how to react. And so all I could think was, wow, this is it. This is the end. Like there was nothing else. And I braced myself for, an impact, and all of a sudden I was on the side of the road. The car was still, the car was going off into the distance.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Was it like a blackout type of thing? Like you don't know what happened and you just ended up on the side of the road?
Yep, just ended up on the side of the road. Don't know. I know I didn't pull over. I know that, 1 minute I was going, oh man, it's over, and the next I was perfectly safe. My daughter was still singing her song in the back, had no clue anything had happened. And
So your daughter didn't even see the semi or nothing.
no, she was just singing along with our little song. I don't even remember. It was probably, if you're happy and you know it or something like that. And she was just singing along, and I mean, it literally went like that, the whole thing. And we were on the side of the road, still and safe.
And for you people that don't think that's biblical or anything like that, it is biblical. We have the story of Philip, who actually was teleported or transported to the eunuch, which is crazy.
Hmm.
um, so how did you feel about that?
I mean, it just occurred to me that, I guess it wasn't my time. That, maybe I had put myself in a bad situation, but God was like, no, I still have things for you to do. So, you know, that this is where you're going to be. And, we were protected. So obviously he still has things in mind for me to do. So I need to make sure that I'm paying attention, praying, and, doing those things that he has for me, those works that he has set aside for me.
Other people, did you mention this to other people?
At the time, no, I didn't really say anything to anybody else at the time, just because it had been so scary. And, truly, I wasn't even sure how to explain. One minute I was, about to be crushed by a semi, and the next I was on the side of the highway perfectly safe. Um, and my husband was deployed at the time, and I didn't want to, give him any extra anxiety. And, it was just kind of me and my daughter. But, when I was writing my book and going through the chapter on my spiritual formation experience, specifically with faith, it definitely just naturally came out to write about it.
And then a lot of the times, I'm not sure if this is something you experienced. Like I know when I've dealt with the supernatural things that are definitely not of this world, or angelic or visions and stuff like that, it's hard to tell people because, especially in today's day and age, you talk to somebody about something like that, and they write you off as some nut, as being
Mm-hmm.
crazy, and, and I mean, you don't want to be ostracized. Nobody does.
No, but I don't even know if I thought about that at the time. It was just, I was in a, very weird space with, work and my daughter, my husband being gone. It was just, at the time, I guess I didn't really feel like I had anyone to share with. But then obviously when I was, writing my book and planning to share with, the world, obviously that was an experience that needed to be shared.
You said that you think God spared you because there's still things that you have to do. Do you have any idea what His will is for you, or what some of those things are?
Well, as I previously mentioned, I do know for sure that, if there's anything I'm called to do in this life, it's teaching. Um, I not only, teach in the schools, but I homeschool my daughter as well. And I know that, not only me did he save, he, saved her life as well. So I know that, it may not even necessarily be about me specifically, but it could be about, her and what she's supposed to do in this life. So I take that very seriously as a mom, and, training her up in the way she should go, is, to quote that verse. But that's just very important to me to not only think about what I'm supposed to do, but also how I need to raise her so that she can do what she needs to do for his kingdom.
What's your advice to any parent that might be listening, and how to raise up their children in the ways of the Lord?
I think one thing that we need to be very careful about as parents and as anyone, working with youth and anyone in general, questions are going to come up. The Bible is not an easy piece of literature. It is not something that, you can read through in one glance and understand and fully get everything. There are going to be questions. There are things that don't make sense. And, Paul says that we're always supposed to be ready to give an answer for why we believe what we believe. And I think that shows true with our children too. Because I, remember asking a lot of questions as a child. Specifically, I was very concerned about the dinosaurs, and that, man, did he create the dinosaurs on the first day? But, science says that, they weren't. And just be open to those questions and things like that. So it's very important to me to just have that open dialogue with your kids.
Is that the miracle child up there in the corner?
Yes, and now she's back and very happy that she ended up in here. That's her. But yeah, just always be open to questions, be ready to answer them, and be ready to have those deep talks about what you believe, why you believe it, and not be upset when there are questions, because that means you're fully engaged.
What is the hardest biblical question you've had to answer?
Oh, man. I'm not sure what the hardest one is as of yet. Probably one of the most trying ones is just about inconsistencies sometimes in the Bible, or what people conceive or perceive as inconsistencies, such as, in Corinthians when they talk about how women should not speak in the church, but then in the next chapter they talk about women prophesying in the church, and they talk about these different things and how they don't seem to go together. And at that point, you have to remember that it's not just the words on the page that matter, but it has to do with who they were speaking to, what was going on at the time, and
The culture.
has
Yeah.
context. Everything has context. So you have to be aware of the context when you're reading the Bible and not just the words on the page.
And there's like a structure to everything that God does. He has things set up in a certain way. But if if uh if all the men are not doing what they're supposed to do, he'll raise up a woman to do it, just like he did with Deborah. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. And
and if they won't do it, if the children won't do it, he said even the rocks will cry out. You know,
exactly. So I mean, God's gonna choose who he chooses, and that's gonna be the end of that. And there is definitely a spiritual headship that goes with being male. I don't deny that. But I also don't deny that all of us, no matter who we are, our first allegiance is to God. So
uh,
sometimes,
are
you
there
may have to lead from behind, so to speak. Anyway, yes, go ahead.
are there any other events from your book that you might want to mention?
Um, I can't really come up with anything specific. Those are the two really big ones: the angelic encounter and the miracle on the roadside, I guess we'll call it. Um, but my book also just does speak to a lot of everyday life things that we deal with as Christians. Like, I talk about, God's work in my marriage, and, how things haven't always been perfect, but how God can work within imperfect people to still accomplish his will. Um, so there's definitely elements of that. And just, I know we're here to kind of talk about the unexplained, the miracles and things like that, but I think there are just everyday miracles that, even just getting to watch a movie with your family at the end of the day, God can be in that. So it's just those everyday moments that really make up a life of faith and worship, and not necessarily just the big ones. Now the big ones can certainly define and change things in big ways, but it's
I
the
totally understand. I've had some similar things happen to me. I mean, throughout most of my life. But one thing that happened recently is like I lost my Bible. So and I lost it at church. I know I lost it there. And I was doing another show with somebody, so I needed to get another Bible. I needed to have a Bible ready just in case. So I
of
went
course.
out and bought one. I didn't really use it. We were using pretty much the apps and the screens. I go to a church the next week, and they hadn't found my Bible. Or yeah, was it, I guess they hadn't found my Bible that week. I bought a new Bible, did the show. The next week, when I showed up, they found my Bible. So I'm like, oh, okay, wow. I took the Bible. I put the new one in the car because I like the old one that I had all marked
Right.
up. I walk in, I sit down, and then a friend from the congregation comes and says, "Can I sit by you?" Yeah, he sits by me, and he hands me a brand new Bible with my name engraved in it. I'm like, oh my gosh, if this isn't God telling me that I need to read something, I don't know what is. And for
Yeah.
some reason or other, I I see the crown on on the screen. I'm like, I don't know why, but I think I gotta read the Book of Kings. And
Mhm.
I kept that in my mind, and I wrote a friend about it, and he's got this social network on school. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but we
Mhm.
were talking about it, and he said, I'm not sure if I was telling him about it. He's I'm not sure if my wife read your post, and I don't think she did, but she came in and she started talking about how she feels that God is telling her to read the book of Judges. I'm like, wow, that's I don't feel there's coincidences and things like that.
No,
That's
no,
kind of telling me that I need to do that. And I'm at work, I'm doing different things, and I start thinking about this in my mind. And I'm listening to a podcast while I'm doing this. And right as I stop and think, man, God is great. He's in everything, and I know that He's probably telling me, as I'm reminiscing all these things that I need to do this. Right
Mhm.
as I think that, the person that's on the podcast says, "Oh, I was reading the other day in the Book of Kings." I'm like, "Wow, wow!" So there are a bunch of tiny little miracles that we experience throughout our life that
Absolutely.
add up. Yeah, yeah, they're just as meaningful as those big ones.
For sure. And I mean, just as you're mentioning that now, thinking about, things that come back around like that. So earlier you were talking about, if the Holy Spirit is in you, there's no room for, demon possession or any of those things. And um, my pastor that at the church that I'm attending right now, that's exactly one of the things that he preached on this past Sunday was, if the Holy Spirit is in you, there's not room for anything else. So it's just interesting that, I've heard that twice now in the same week. Obviously God's trying to, tell me something in some way about that. So I need to
Yeah,
unpack
because
that a little bit.
I'm of the school of thought that people that are Christians do deal with demons. There's generational curses. There's oppressing demons. There's a bunch of stuff like that. People think that you can. Oh, I'm a Christian now. Life is rainbows and puppies now. That's all it is now. No, the streets are going to be paved with gold. Everything's going to be
Right.
perfect,
Yeah.
and that's just not the
No.
way it is.
No.
I've dealt with what I believe are demons trying to distract me, trying to mess with my mind. And it takes sometimes a lot of prayer, a lot of conscious thought of trying to get rid of these things, and they don't just go away. I
Absolutely.
think that's why it's called spiritual warfare, not spiritual one shot punch out. They don't just
Right.
go
Yeah.
away.
Exactly. It is not a one and done deal. It's an everyday walk.
So how's your prayer life today?
I would right now. I would say it's probably in the best place that it's ever been. Um, I do a really good job with my quiet time in the mornings. I'm reading through the book of Proverbs right now, which is, probably my favorite book. I love Proverbs. I love that, um, just the personification of wisdom in that book just always hits me. That it's just wisdom is real, and it, it's alive and it's living through us, and God is the giver of wisdom, and those kinds of things. And it you know, I love being able to read and then have conversation with God about what I've read and what it means. And, also just looking into the context as well. I do have, some biblical commentaries and things like that I'll read to go along with it, and, study Bible. And because it's important to me, not, like I said, just to read the words, but you have to know who was talking, who they were talking to, and, why it was written. And
So
so
does your husband go into the word as much as you do?
he does. He does. We often will, right there side by side before we even get out of bed in the morning. That's kind of, we're both doing our thing. We're on different books of the Bible, but we're doing our thing next to each other. And then when the prayer time comes, sometimes we just, silently hold hands while we, talk about it. It's kind of a very sweet thing that we have going on.
How, in your opinion, um, what are some things you need to know to maintain a healthy Christian relationship in marriage?
Well, first and foremost, you have to maintain your relationship with the Lord. Like that relationship comes before anything else. He's the one that teaches you how to love. He's the one that teaches you what love is. So that comes first. And then after that, it's a matter of remembering to treat one another, the way that Christ treats us. And, obviously we're human. We don't always make it. We, say snide things. We forget to take out the trash. All kinds of things, right? Like everyday living with someone else isn't always, puppies and rainbows. But if you want to honor God in your marriage, it's just a matter of trying to remember, everything that Christ has done for you, and then pass that on to the person that you're with every day. That's the big one.
Okay. Where do you think we are in the prophetic calendar? Like, do you think Jesus is coming within the next 5 years? Is he 10 years off? Or is he
I'm going to
100
tell
years
you,
off?
I have absolutely no idea. I feel like it could be any moment. I feel like it could be thousands of years in the future. I feel like no matter what, we have to be prepared for it to be, the next minute. But I truly have no idea.
Okay. So before we go, is there anything you want to reach out and tell our viewers where they can find you? Anything like that?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/author Kaitlyn Ramos. I also have a Substack under my name, Kaitlyn Ramos. And then, of course, my book, A Dream Fulfilled Life, that's available on Amazon. So that's pretty much where you can find me.
Okay. Would you mind and pray us out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we have had to come together and talk about the amazing ways that you work through us. Even the small miracles, the everyday miracles, the miracles in your creation, and the big ones too, Lord. The times when, the angels watch over us, or we're tested through the angels. Lord, we also thank you for the miracles, the big miracles that are unexplainable, God. And I thank you for the time that we've had to talk about that, to worship your name, and to be together, because wherever two or more are gathered, you are there. And I thank you for the time to do that today, God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us to this episode of Grout on the Tar Pit. Thank you, Kaitlyn. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto. Welcome to the grotto.